morning, or wow, good afternoon. Sorry about that. Long day. Um, we are going to give folks a few minutes to join, and then we are going to get started. And if you do have questions during the webinar, we would just ask that you put them in the Q&A. You should see it on your Zoom screen, the option for Q&A versus chat. If you put your questions there, that'll just allow us to answer them for the whole webinar. All right, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, just letting folks join. Hi to those who are just joining. We are going to get started in just a few minutes. Just letting everybody log on. And for folks who are just joining, if you do have questions throughout, please ask them in the question and answer or the Q&A section instead of the chat. That'll let us answer them for everyone in the webinar so that we can, since everyone is dealing with overlapping issues. And if you submitted questions when you registered, we have those questions and we're planning to address them throughout. All right, we are going to get started in 1 minute. We are just giving folks a moment to join. And for folks who are just joining, we just ask that you, as questions come up, please ask them in the Q&A. It's like we've got one already, so I appreciate that. We will answer the questions that are in the Q&A so that everyone can learn from them. And we also received the questions that you submitted as you registered, and we'll answer those questions throughout. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Anna Brem. I am the advocate and manager of capacity building on the Robin Hood project at AFC. And I'm going to pass it to Janelle to introduce herself and get started.
Hi, my name is Janelle Canals. I'm the director of the Robin Hood project. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A, and we will answer it there. I just answered one already, which is a great question of why does an OPT publicize their contact information, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But just to get started, we're going to ask you all a couple of questions about yourselves so we can know who our audience is and we can tailor this training to your questions and how you need help. So if you could just put your email address, put your first and last name, and tell us whether or not you are a student, a parent, or educator, or other professional, where you live in New York. Really quick introductory poll. And once you answer those questions, we'll get started. Okay. Anna, did everybody complete it?
Not quite, but we're going to move on to the next slide as folks finish that up.
Okay. So today we're going to cover a bunch of different things. It's going to address hopefully a lot of your concerns related to transportation. And if we don't, we will stay on a little bit longer at the end to answer any questions remaining questions that you have that weren't covered during the training. So we're going to start with a little bit about us, the types of busing and the eligibility requirements for each of those, how busing for students with disabilities works, then busing for students in temporary housing and foster care. Then when there are exceptions to general busing, right? So who can get busing outside of what our general rules are. We'll talk about the New York City Students Accounts portal and how to track your child's bus. And then we'll do a whole section on getting help. So what if I can't find my bus route? What if I can't, what if my student's busing isn't coming on time? What if I still don't have a route and I asked for one several days ago? So if you could just finish these questions and we'll get started with that in a minute. Anna, can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
So while you ask questions about answer questions about your demographic information, we are from Advocates for Children, which is an independent agency that supports students and families in New York City with a right to education. We have a helpline that is open to all families, professionals to call if they have any questions related to education or if they're having issues like busing. or any other issues related to education in New York City. Our helpline is open Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4. You can always leave a voicemail, and we try to get back to voicemails within 3 business days. We conduct workshops and trainings like this one. We have guides and resources on our website. We also do policy advocacy and impact litigation to try to systemically make changes to New York City so that it better serves families and communities. And we provide free legal services to qualifying families as well. So there are a couple of different types of busing in New York City. So we'll start with the first one, which is stop to stop. And this is essentially a system that works as it picks up a student at a designated stop that are on a bus route that already exists, and it drops the student off at a designated spot, sometimes the school. Eligibility is based on grade and distance and if a bus is available. So for students that are in kindergarten through 2nd grade that live more than a half a mile from their school, they may be eligible for stop-to-stop busing. And for students grades 3 through 6 who live more than a mile from school, they also may be eligible for stop-to-stop busing. The public school has to be in the same district that the family resides. For non-public charter or citywide programs, it has to be within the same borough. It is possible to add a stop to an existing route if asked, and so that's something that you could ask your school with support on, to perhaps add a stop to your to an existing route that's going to their school.
Sorry about that.
So then the next type of transportation is curb to school. And curb to school is when a student is picked up at their home and then the bus drops them off directly at their school. This is available to students who have transportation on their IEPs, so their individualized education programs, so students with disabilities who are eligible for services under their IEP, or for children with Section 504 plans, which are also students with disabilities who have needs that the school has identified. It is also available to students who qualify for a medical exception after applying for that with OPT. Sometimes it's referred to as specialized transportation for students to get a alternate drop off. So if they get picked up from home and then after school they want to be dropped off somewhere else, they actually have to submit a request in order to do that with specialized busing. If there's no route, or if your child needs transportation, but they don't qualify for busing based on their distance, students are also available to get Omni cards if they live more than half a mile away. The school provides them to the students. The students get 4 rides daily, any place, anytime. It includes the weekends and vacations too, and it's just part of the tap and go transit system. So students can get from home to school, and from school back to home.
All right, so talking about busing for students with disabilities. So this is the type of busing that would be recommended on a student's IEP. We've included a screenshot of what it actually looks like on the IEP, the section to look for to see if your student does in fact have busing recommended on the IEP. The section is called special transportation, and it's a checkbox. And there's either a box checked that says none, that there's no specialized transportation recommended, or there's a second checkbox that does say that the student is recommended for special transportation. And then usually there's a line underneath of that that says any specific accommodations that are going to be recommended. So this is where you would check to see, does your student have limited travel time recommended? Or in this case, the screenshot that we've included, there's no limited travel time recommendation. There aren't additional accommodations, and it's just that the student is recommended to receive busing from the closest safe curb location to the school. So something to keep in mind, not all students with IEPs are eligible for busing. This is specifically for students who have this recommendation on their IEP. And that's why we included this screenshot. So students who do have busing recommended on their IEP are eligible for what's called specialized busing or curb to school busing, like Janelle referred to earlier. And if any accommodations are listed on the IEP, like I mentioned, those accommodations have to be provided in the form of an appropriate bus route. So that could be limited travel time, that could be a bus paraprofessional, and it could be air conditioning on the bus, things like that. So for travel time, that's one that very commonly comes up. We'll go into more detail about how to actually request medical accommodations, such as travel time, but keep in mind that it must be reasonable and it's subjective depending on the location of your home, the school, and traffic. So this is going to vary depending on like what the DOE determines as reasonable travel time varies depending on whether the student goes to school in the same borough where they live or if they go to school in another borough. Okay, so thinking about bus accommodations. So these are the things that would be recommended on the IEP. Again, you can have just busing recommended on your IEP, but you can also have accommodations for that busing listed in addition to the IEP recommendation for busing. So some examples would be bus paraprofessional, specialized vehicles like a smaller bus, for instance, medical or nursing services. This is an example of an accommodation that is going to require additional medical documentation. Limited travel time. So this is for students who need routes less than 60 minutes. Climate control, i.e. air conditioning on the bus. Unfortunately, that is not standard to all New York City school buses. Porter services, safety vests, and car seats. So we're going to talk now about how to actually obtain, how to request those accommodations. And I do see lots of questions coming in, and I know that Janelle is working on answering those, and we'll go back and forth. So for those accommodations that do require medical documentation, there's a form called the Medical Accommodations Request Form, or the MARF. We will share these slides afterwards, and we've linked to the form. This is something that you have to fill out every year, even if it sounds familiar and you filled it out last school year, you do have to fill out another form. And once you filled out the form, the Office of School Health reviews the form and may then be required to, you will have to have an IEP meeting. I'm sorry, I misspoke. You will have to have an IEP meeting to add that accommodation to the IEP. And someone from the Office of School Health may need to participate in that meeting to discuss the accommodation and add it to the IEP. As you'll see when you review the MARF form, the Medical Accommodation Request Form, it has to be filled out by your child's doctor. One question that I get frequently is like, my student has a pediatrician for their primary care, they have a gastroenterologist, and the reason why we're asking for an accommodation is something that they're being treated by the gastroenterologist. And so they might be asking me like, who should I have fill out the form? If your child has multiple doctors who are monitoring the same condition and the medical accommodation is for a condition that's being monitored by multiple doctors, one of the doctors who can speak to the condition and who can explain why your child needs an accommodation related to that condition, that's the doctor that should fill out the form. So all this to say, you may have multiple clinicians that you're working with who can fill it out. The purpose of the form is just to make that connection between what your student's medical condition is and why they need this accommodation on the bus. Okay, so thinking about free school students with disabilities who may need busing accommodations. So children in pre-K and early intervention programs automatically receive specialized busing if they are recommended to receive instruction in a preschool special class. So that's a special class in a specialized school or a special class in an integrated setting. So even if the student does not have busing actually listed on their pre-K IEP, they're still entitled to busing. It is something to keep in mind because students who Students who are being recommended to be placed in a special class may need to travel a bit more of a distance to that special class. So, in addition, you can also have accommodations such as an approved child safety restraint system, so a CSRS, a car seat, an integrated seat when necessary. You can add accommodations for the child to be assisted, to be properly secured in the bus seat or the CSRS. You can have accommodations for an attendant who remains on the bus at all times with the child, as opposed to, the matron who may be stepping on and off as children get on the bus, and any other accommodations must be listed on the IEP. So similar to students who are older than pre-K, but there's just this additional set of accommodations that can be added.
Okay, so in addition to students who may be eligible for the type of transportation we just spoke about, students in temporary housing and foster care are also entitled to bus transportation in New York City. All students in temporary housing and foster care are entitled to transportation. So the question is sort of when they're eligible for Metro cards versus busing. While residing in temporary housing, all students are in temporary housing are eligible for transportation until the end of the school year in which they transition into permanent housing. They also may be eligible for the following school year from when they transition into permanent housing if that school year is the last school year that their child will be attending the school building. And also students in foster care are entitled to transportation, busing, or Omni cards, depending if there is a bus route available. In New York City, there are lots of options for transportation. So there's Omni cards available to students who are in foster care and in temporary housing, 4 rides per day. Parents of students in temporary housing or in foster care are also entitled to Metro cards. They usually get monthly or weekly Metro cards, and it doesn't matter the age of their student. It can be 3K through 12th grade. Parents of newly routed students, so let's say you just entered temporary housing and you're waiting for your bus route, a parent can get Metro cards in the meantime while waiting for the bus route to take their kid to and from school. Busing in New York City is given to students in temporary housing that are in grades K through 6. For students in grades 7 through 8 with an IEP, but their IEP doesn't have busing, if they're in temporary housing, they also get busing. And then 3K and pre-K students will get busing if a route is available. So that's really if is a big question. So you have to make, you can ask for it, but you may not get it. Otherwise, you would get Metro cards for the parent and the student. Remember that this applies to students in temporary housing. If there is transportation on the student's IEP, it doesn't matter what type of housings you reside, you're entitled to transportation, busing, excuse me. So the way that students and families get Metro cards or Omni cards is they actually get it from their schools. So students in temporary housing will get full fare cards, so regardless of distance, and parents from grades 3K to 12 will also get monthly or weekly typically to bring their child from school. Parents can also get Metro cards from the students in temporary housing regional liaisons, so their community assistants within their shelters, or community coordinators, family assistants within their shelters, to go to school events. So like other things that are outside of the particular school day or while they're awaiting busing. So school-based liaisons, that students in temporary housing liaisons should be providing this, but if you're having a difficult time, you can go to your community coordinator or family assistant at your shelter. There are also a list of students in temporary housing regional managers that will support you in getting Metro cards as well. So for students who in temporary housing, again, if it's on their IEP, what has to happen is if you transition into temporary housing and your address changes, you have to notify the school of your change in address. The school has to change the address in the system. And once the address is changed, the students should automatically be rerouted from their new address to their school. And that usually takes about 7 days, right? So if your child has an IEP and you change the address and your whether you're a student in temporary housing or actually not a student in temporary housing, you just change your address, your busing should happen within 7 days of changing your address in the system. But the school has to do that. So you need to follow up with that. For students who reside in DHS shelters or Department of Homeless Services shelters, students are automatically routed. Once they reside in the DHS shelter, they will be uploaded, their names will be uploaded into a system that automatically routes them from the shelter they reside in to their school, whether they have transportation on their IEP or whether they're a student in temporary housing getting transportation through student in temporary housing provision. Other forms of temporary housing, though, require a different process to be routed. So if you reside in a domestic violence shelter or any other transitional non-DHS shelter, if you're doubled up or you're in a hotel or you're transitioning into permanent housing, you first have to update your address with the school, and then you must complete an exceptions request form in order to request busing. Busing will be arranged within 7 to 10 days of the submission of the request form. If this request form is submitted, but the school hasn't updated the address, and so it doesn't match, it won't begin. So it's really important, if you learn anything from this slide, that like the school must update your address for all of this to get started. It's still me, Anna? Okay, exceptions. So in addition to the eligibility that we just spoke about, there are also a number of exceptions. So like you might be entitled to transportation based on one of these exceptions. If you have joint custody, if there is a hazard in the way for you to be able to get to school, you might need busing. If you are a victim of a crime and need an order or have an order of protection that requires you to get transportation to and from school. If there is a medical accommodation that's not part of the IEP process, separate. So you might have a student might have diabetes. They don't have an IEP or a 504 plan, but they have diabetes. And they need a shorter bus route. This would be the way to request busing. And a victim, those are repeated. There we go. So these also require a form to request transportation called an exceptions form. And we're going to get into how to do that in a second. So this form needs to be completed for students in temporary housing and foster care who do not reside in DHS shelters. It also needs to be completed if you're requesting busing based on a medical accommodation, joint custody, hazard, or a victim of a crime or an order of protection. When you're completing this form, and we'll send the link around, you need to put in all the information. The address here must match the address that the school has. If you reside in a confidential shelter location that has a PO box, you can put the PO box in here, and your school can put the PO box in as your address. And so please do not let any school tell you that a PO box cannot be the address. It can. And it can be in the address here too. OPT has the locations of the confidential shelters based on PO boxes. And so as long as it's a confidential shelter location, that you can put in a PO box here. You will not need additional documentation filling out this form if you're a student in temporary housing or foster care. However, if you are a student who's requesting transportation on this form based on a hazard, joint custody, a medical need, or an order of protection or a victim of a crime, you will need additional documentation, and you'll need to add it when you submit this form.
All right. Janelle, I was in the midst of answering some questions in the Q&A, if you can take a look at that.
Yes.
So as Janelle was mentioning, the key to all of this is making sure that the school has updated the address in their computer systems. You might hear us refer to ATS. That's the DOE computer system that records students' addresses, contact information, things like that. I would also recommend that when you are submitting an exceptions request, that you log into NYCSA, your New York City students account. If you do not have an account, and we'll show you what that looks like a little bit later if that sounds familiar, but you don't recognize it. If you don't have an account, I would strongly recommend asking your school for an account creation code. That's a code that actually links your child to an account that you create. NYCSA Access is really helpful because it allows you to log in and check transportation info. You can also log in and check IEP info. There's a wealth of information. And when your student is routed, it will allow you to actually log in and track the GPS location of your student's bus. So NYCSA accounts are very helpful. You will need an account creation code from your school in order to log in. For exceptions requests, the reasons why we recommend them is so that you can actually track the status of your request for busing. It will allow you to log into NYCSA and see, okay, the request has been approved. Now they're being routed. Oh, okay, now they've been routed. Here's the route info. So just allows you to access that information much more directly than calling the school and having to ask for that info. If you don't have NYCSA access and you want to complete that form right away, that's fine. Just log in as a guest and save the reference number once you do actually complete the acceptance request form. OPT will contact you at the email that you provide, so be sure to include an email that you check regularly, and be sure to check it regularly after you submitted this form. They may call you, so also be sure to answer any unknown numbers. If you have questions about the status of an acceptance request, or you get an email that it's been rejected for some reason, that you've been found ineligible and you need an explanation, we would recommend emailing busingexceptions@schools.nyc.gov and include the reference number, the student name, and the student's OSIS, the student ID number, or the date of birth. I do see in the Q&A someone asking, can you complete the NYCSA account as a guest before getting the account creation code from your school? You can complete the exceptions request form as a guest. It just won't be linked to your NYCSA account. You can also create a NYCSA account. It's really just like your email and a password, but it won't have your children associated with it until you get the account creation code from your school. So let's say I have 2 kids and one's in elementary and one's in middle school. I have to get an account creation code for my elementary schoolers' school, get them associated with my account, and then I have to ask my middle schooler school for their account creation code, and then they will be associated with my account. But yes, you can submit these exceptions requests before you have a NYCSA account. Okay. Moving on. So this is the NYCSA portal that I'm referring to. If this screen looks at all familiar, hopefully that means you have a NYCSA account. There are directions on the DOE's website about how to set up an account. Like we talked about, you'll need account creation codes to link your children to the account. And if you don't have one, you should ask your child's school. Usually someone in the front office, the pupil accounting secretary, the parent coordinator, that's typically who can give out these codes. This is what the NYCSA portal looks like once you log in. So as you can see, we've circled where there's a little icon of a school bus and it says transportation. If you click on that, then you'll see what's on the right of the screen where there's route information to school and from school. Sometimes students are placed on 2 different bus routes, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Bus routes often have students for multiple schools. So if schools, dismissal times are slightly different, the group of students that need a bus route in the afternoon might be slightly different than the group who needs it in the morning. So all this to say, you might be working with 2 different bus companies and 2 different bus drivers. It's also possible that your student's on 2 different buses by the same bus company. It's pretty variable. Something that I don't think we mentioned at the beginning of this that is worth mentioning is that New York City works with about 40 to 50 different bus companies to provide busing across the city. So that's why there are so many different companies involved, and why it can get a bit complicated. So if you take a look at the pickup location, that should be a location close to your home. If you do reside in a confidential location, such as a domestic violence shelter, this should say something like the operations or confidential. You will see the route number and the bus company. If busing is set to start and you haven't received a call from the bus company with information about the pickup time, sometimes there's not pickup times listed on NYCSA as there is here. I would reach out to the bus company. There is a phone number again listed here. Call the bus company and ask for the pickup time for your student on route. It looks like here is Q3074, assuming I can read the small print on my screen. So I would recommend for the first few days of a new route to be ready and to be outside maybe 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes before the time that they give you. These times are estimates. They're based on what the bus company estimates they'll arrive at your home. There's traffic, there's lots of variables that are hard to control for. And so it takes a couple weeks of driving a route before the bus driver knows exactly what time they're going to reliably arrive. If you have requested an alternate drop-off that's on a particular day, be sure to check when you look at NYCSA if you can see on this screenshot, this is for a student's route on Monday. There might be variation if you've requested an alternate drop-off and maybe they go to an after-school program on Tuesday, Wednesday. Make sure that the route information listed shows that alternate drop-off on the days that you requested it. All right, and this is, again, one other pitch for creating a NYCSA account and logging in. New York City has what's called the NYC school bus app. It allows you to track the location of your child's bus. You have to log into, this app is available on the App Store, but you have to log in using your NYCSA account. And if you ever log in and you don't see your child's bus, or there's like some sort of error message where you're not getting an updated GPS location, that may mean that the bus driver hasn't enabled GPS. I would recommend, this is a situation where I would recommend either speaking to the bus driver when they pick up the student, or calling dispatch for the particular bus company. If you can't get anywhere with the bus company, then I would reach out to OPT customer service, but I would start with the bus company first. Sometimes it's as simple as the driver hasn't known to switch something on. Okay, and I'm going to pass it back to Janelle.
So we're going to get into how to troubleshoot, and I know a couple of you have asked some questions about, what to do if everything that we just said doesn't go right. So you're eligible for transportation and you're supposed to get a bus and you don't know, right? Or it's not coming, or you're still not routed. So how do I know my child's bus route and their pickup time? So the first thing, and this is, New York City has been moving toward this for a really the last couple of school years, is they just want everybody to look at their New York City students account to find this information. So if you do not have a New York City students account, you should probably try to get one, because the school, the first thing they're going to tell you, or the bus company is going to tell you, is look on NYCSA. So you should try to get one, get the code, set it up, because it is pretty accessible and easy to see once you have this account. The bus company should be contacting you before the route begins with the pickup and the drop-off time. They don't always call. And so you can call directly. We have the links here for the school age bus companies and also the pre-K and early intervention bus companies. Make sure you know your child's route, but when you're calling, to ask that. Not all bus company customer service lines are created equal. And so, it could be challenging. I know we've heard of if they don't pick up, if making a complaint with them it doesn't do anything. And we completely understand that is an ongoing issue. And so, getting an NYCSA account could help with that, because it does have the pickup time. It doesn't necessarily, and it has the estimated drop off time. But again, The first couple of weeks is a little bit fluid to figure out really how that's going to look. And the VIA app can be helpful with that. I know someone just said that how do you make a complaint for that? There is a way to complain about it as well. You can complain to OPT or you can complain directly to the app, I believe. So if you can't reach the company, like let's say you keep calling the phone number over and over and over again and it doesn't answer, you should definitely make a complaint with OPT, either at their customer service line or through their online form, because they need to know that the company is not picking up the phone. So that is important. You should also contact your district's transportation liaison, and include the complaint number that you got from OPT when you called. So whenever you call or fill out a form online with OPT, you're gonna get a complaint number, and you should save that complaint number, share it with your school transportation liaison and with your district transportation liaison. That number is really important because it will be able to help the people in the DOE you're reaching to figure out like what you're complaining about, how often you complained. Families who are having difficulties with preschool special education transportation or early intervention could also contact a specific email address for early childhood busing at schools, as well as their committee on preschool special education offices. So what if the bus has the wrong pickup location? So you have a route, but it's not going to the right place, right? It's picking your kid up at the wrong place. The first thing to do here would actually be to contact your school's transportation coordinator and confirm that they have the correct address on the ridership report, right? So all schools have a list of the routes and what the routes are. So like where they're picking up the student. And so the first thing to do is to make sure that your address is correct, or the stop, right? Because if you're getting stop to stop, or the stop is correct on that report. If it doesn't have the right address, then the school actually has to correct the address because the address comes from their system. So it could be that they never updated the address when you provided them an updated address. And so they need to update it in their system so it can update for OPP. And that's for both special education students, students in temporary housing, and students who are receiving stop to stop. If you reside in a confidential location that has a PO box, please make sure your school puts in the PO box. Do not, I repeat, do not provide them with a cross street next to it, even if they ask for it, because that is not how transportation works for confidential locations. It is associated with a PO box, and you should be able to do that. If you're having difficulties with that, you should contact your transportation liaison at the district level, not at the school level. But if everything is accurate in the systems, the address is correct and the ridership is correct, and they're still picking up at the wrong stop, you should contact the district's transportation liaison to make sure to tell them that the bus is refusing to pick your kid up at the location that's identified on the ridership report. If your child attends a charter school or a non-public school, you still should contact the district liaison, but you can also contact the Committee on Special Education if your child is getting special education busing. Okay, so help. The bus is late, or it doesn't come at all, or it's too early, or the route is really long. So all different types of complaints where you have a route already, but the route is really not functional, right? It's really too early, or it comes some days and not other days, or your kid is getting to school an hour late, or your kid's getting to school an hour too early. And all of these things. These types of complaints require consistency and a lot of persistence in making complaints to OPT. So you have to complain enough to establish why they need to put your child on a new route, which they will not do after one complaint. So every time something like this happens, you need to make a complaint, whether it's on the phone or online. We have been hearing this last 2 weeks of school that when you call the line, OPT is telling you they won't take complaints over the phone, and then you have to do it online. That is untrue. They are required to take complaints on the phone, so please push against that and say no. It's my understanding that you can submit complaints on the phone or online. I prefer on the phone, and I want a reference number for my call. They are supposed to do both. You can make a complaint online every time it happens. It's not that hard to make a complaint online, and if you have a New York City students accounts, it's actually even easier, and we're going to go over that in a little bit. But you have to make a complaint every time. Once you've made a couple of complaints, you should also tell your school's transportation coordinator to make complaints too. Because parents aren't the only ones that can make complaints based on routes. The school can also. And so the transportation coordinator at your school can make a complaint about the students on that route arriving late or arriving too early or it being too long. And so the combination of your complaints and the transportation liaison's complaints at the school can really help establish why a new route needs to be done. If you've done this a couple of times and it's not resolved, so let's say you've done it for a whole week and it's not resolved, you need to contact your district transportation liaison, include all of the complaint numbers and a request for a new route. And that, should be able to resolve it. There's a lot of contacts on the transportation liaison website that's for all the districts. And then there are also contacts for people if they don't answer as well. So like the supervisor of all transportation liaisons.
All right. So for students who qualify for busing but haven't actually been routed, a few different approaches depending on what type of busing your student is eligible for. So for stop-to-stop bus students, so that is students who qualify for busing based on distance, contact your school's transportation coordinator and then your district's transportation liaison. For students with IEP mandated busing, same thing, contact your school's transportation coordinator and the district's transportation liaison. If your student has IEP mandated busing and attends a charter school or a non-public school, contact the Committee on Special Education. As we said in the chat in the Q&A in response to your question, just keep in mind, charter schools, students who attend charter schools receive busing through the Department of Education. The Department of Education provides busing, not the charter school. Common issue that we run into is charter schools telling families that they do not provide busing. If a student has IEP mandated busing, if a student's eligible for busing because of their temporary housing status, distance, whatever it is, they receive that busing from the Department of Education. The charter school cannot tell you that your child can't receive busing. If you're having problems with IEP mandated busing and your child's at a charter school or non-public school, it's the CSE, the Committee on Special Education for your region, that's actually going to be able to address those issues. If your child, and again, that's for if they have not actually been routed. For students who are in kindergarten through 6th grade who reside in DHS shelters, or students in 7th and 8th grade with IEPs who reside in DHS shelters, the troubleshooting process would be to contact first the shelter student and temporary housing family assistant. That's a DOE employee who works in the shelter, but they're DOE. Then I would move on to the shelter-based community coordinator. Same thing, DOE, but based at your particular shelter. They may move around between a few shelters. And then the next step after that would be the student in temporary housing regional manager for your district. There's a few regional managers per borough, and they're usually assigned maybe 3 to 4 districts within a particular borough. We will link at the end of the training to the places to find the contact info for the regional managers. And then for students in other forms of temporary housing, so same eligibility ages or grades, I'm sorry. So K through 6 who live in other forms of temporary housing, and 7th and 8th graders who have IEPs. If they live in another form of temporary housing other than DHS shelters, this is through the exceptions request process, as a reminder. So if they, one, make sure that you filled out an exceptions request or that the school has filled out an acceptance request. And if the busing request was filled out, but it hasn't been approved after 7 to 10 business days, then email busing exceptions, the transportation liaison, and the STH regional manager. Keep in mind, this is exceptions requests, and this kind of troubleshooting path is applicable not just for these age groups of students who are in temporary housing, but also students who are in the process of moving into permanent housing and you remain eligible for busing based on temporary housing status for the rest of the school year after you enter permanent housing, and an additional year if that's going to be your last year in a particular school. So let's say if you move into permanent housing in the middle of 7th grade, you can continue to get busing for 8th grade because after 8th grade, you move on to a new school. Also, just another reminder, 3K and pre-K students who are in temporary housing, they're eligible for transportation. They're not necessarily entitled to busing, but if they do not have a specialized class recommended on their IEP, but we certainly recommend submitting exceptions requests. It's very possible that there is already a route between your shelter and your child's school. And oftentimes something we run into is families where there's older students who are going to the same school. There's a 3K or pre-K in the same school building or right nearby. The older siblings are already on a route going to school between the same shelter, the same school. There's no reason why the preschooler can't be added to that route as well. So would still recommend submitting an exceptions request for those students. All right. So let's say your issue is that your child is not receiving their IEP mandated bus accommodations. So if your child isn't receiving an accommodation on the bus, like a paraprofessional or limited travel time, you can contact specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov. In that email, we would recommend including your child's name, their date of birth, and or their student ID number, the parent or guardian's name, the school name, and then what accommodation it is that's not being implemented. The reason why we're recommending going to special education at schools is because this is a special education issue. If your child isn't receiving something that is on their IEP, it's a special education issue, even though in this case it's transportation or an accommodation for transportation. If your child attends a charter school or a non-public school, still include special education at schools because, like we said, students at charter and non-public schools, the busing is still being provided by the Department of Education. So still include special education at schools, but also include on that same email the CSE for your district. And then if your child isn't receiving their IEP mandated nurse on the bus or their route doesn't meet limited travel time, then it's OPT that you should be contacting. I misspoke and I accidentally included limited travel time for the first bullet, but limited travel time or nursing, you should be contacting OPT, your district transportation liaison, and special education at schools. Okay, so let's say you are waiting for busing, whether you're waiting for your student to be routed or you've got a route, but it hasn't gotten into effect yet, but your child still needs to go to school, of course. You've got some options. All students that live more than half a mile away from school are entitled to Omni cards. These are the cards we mentioned at the beginning of the training. It's one card, works for the whole year, 365 days, whether school's in session or not. Parents of students who are in temporary housing or foster care are also eligible for Metro cards for themselves, in addition to the child's Omni card, regardless of their child's age. So whether I am bringing my 3-year-old to 3K or I'm bringing my 10th grader to high school, if I'm in temporary housing, I'm eligible for an adult Metro card for myself to travel with my student to and from school if my student isn't receiving busing. The school's transportation coordinator can handle providing those cards to you. Oftentimes for parents, what we see is that the school gives out monthly Metro cards. And so it is a little bit tricky because you got to go back to the school and pick up the next month's Metro card when your last month expires. But we have been told that the DOE is going to be transitioning from parent Metro cards to parent Omni cards, like the student Omni cards. But that's going to happen later towards the end of 2025. We don't know exactly when. Then there's prepaid rideshare. So if a student is eligible for busing based on their IEP, their temporary housing status, or their foster care status, they may be eligible for prepaid rideshare while they're waiting for a route to go into effect. The timing of like after how many days are you eligible for is different depending on each type of busing. We'll go into that on the next slide. But something else to keep in mind is that if same groups of students, IEP busing, foster care, or temporary housing, you may also be eligible for reimbursement if you have to spend money on transportation while you're waiting for busing. So save your receipts and submit a request for reimbursement via Support Hub. Everything, all the forms now, they're all going to be, you're going to find all of them on Support Hub. This could be that you're paying for Ubers. This could be that you're paying a trusted friend or family member to take the child to school. Keep your receipts regardless. Okay, and then Janelle, you're going to talk about rideshare eligibility, and do you want to just talk about that question we got beforehand about when it's not always a great option?
Yeah, I will include that. Okay, so for, as I said, a rideshare, prepaid rideshare, which is that you're requesting rideshare and the district is already paying for it. You don't have to upfront the cost, it's already paid for. Is available to students who, so if you have an IEP that mandates busing, if you do not have a route after 7 days of your address being updated, so let's say you moved or your address is correct and it's the start of the school year and it's now been more than 7 days, which I know some of you have asked that, like your kid has had IEP busing all year, had it last year, and the first day of school they didn't have a route and they still don't. It has now been more than 7 school days. You are entitled to rideshare, to prepaid rideshare. You are entitled to prepaid rideshare if there is no route available, or if you have a route, but you don't have a bus paraprofessional, and so your child cannot get on the bus. Or if you have a route, but it is not complying with any of the accommodations on your child's IEP. So there's no nurse, there's no bus paraprofessional, there is it's outside of the limited time travel that is required. Any of those things, you would be entitled to ride share 7 days after everything has been correct and the transportation has been requested. So if you moved, but you haven't provided your address or the school did not update your address when you gave it to them, that's not when the ride eligibility starts. It starts when everything is correct in the system. And now you've waited 7 days and you still don't have a bus route, or you still don't have a bus pair, or you still don't have a nurse. Then you're eligible for rideshare. Students with IEPs who do not have a bus paraprofessional or a nurse, their rideshare code is actually automatically updated to their New York City students accounts on the 7th day. So if and I believe this is also for IEP students who do not have routes, but they have IEP mandated busing. So if your child does not have a route yet and your school did not tell you about rideshare, go onto your New York City students accounts. You may already have a rideshare code sitting there waiting for you and the school did not tell you. I say this because within the last 2 weeks, I've dealt with this issue so many times, and I've dealt with District 75 schools not telling parents that they're eligible for rideshare, but the code is already on the parents' New York City students accounts, and they didn't know it. So please get a New York City students account and look it up because it might already be there and you can be getting prepaid rideshare. This, for students in temporary housing or in foster care, you are eligible for prepaid rideshare after 10 days if the route is not available. So if you have requested a route, whether you're in a DHS shelter or in a different form of shelter in foster care, it's been 10 days since the address has been updated, everything is correct, and now you've waited 10 days, you don't have a bus route still, you are eligible for rideshare. So someone asked, how do parents do this? It's like, you need to go to work. How do you do rideshare? It is not the best system because it does require that parents ride with the student. The student cannot ride on their own. You have to book the rideshare directly through your New York City students accounts, or you can call this number with the voucher code. It is easier to do it through the New York City students accounts. It is harder to do it on the phone. So you should try to do it through the online system. You could book 4 rides a day. So from your home to the school, from the school to wherever you need to go. It does not have to be back home. It could be back to work. It could be to work, or it could be to any other location. And then from wherever you are to the school, and from the school to wherever you want to go. It does not have to be back to your home. The code works for pickups and drop-offs in the morning and also for pickups and drop-offs in the afternoon. But it does require a parent to go. And so some of the things that might work out better is you might instead want to go for reimbursement where you're asking for reimbursement for transportation. That might give you some flexibility if you trust somebody that you can pay them to bring your child back and forth and get receipts from them and then get reimbursed for that if you can't make it. But it is not a perfect system and it's not helpful. And the most helpful way is to get a bus for your kid. And so like even with rideshare, once you have a rideshare code, if you still want busing, you should still be annoying the school, the OPT, and the transportation liaison for a route. Just because you got rideshare does not mean that you're not entitled to a bus. You can't have both at the same time, but you can use rideshare until you get a route. And so you should be, if you prefer busing, you can continue to ask for it as you're using rideshare. Okay, so what happens if something doesn't go right on the bus? So if your um, child doesn't feel safe or respected on the bus, they do have a right to feel safe and respected on the bus. If you feel that your child feels unsafe on the bus because bus staff, so the matron or the driver, is not treating your child with respect, or you feel that they're unsafe because of that, you need to make a complaint with OPT and with the school-based transportation coordinator and ask the school-based transportation coordinator to also make a complaint with OPT. They will investigate and address the issue with the bus company. Like we said before, if this is happening consistently, you should make this complaint every time it happens. So one time will not get you a new bus route or a new bus driver. Several times may get you a new bus route with a new bus driver. The only one time it will happen is if it's something that's very, very unsafe. So, do this consistently if what you want is a new bus driver or a new adult on the bus. If the issue actually has to do with other students on the bus, it is not a complaint to OPT. It is actually a complaint to your school. So you need to actually make a complaint to your school's transportation coordinator as well as the principal at the school. If it has to do with bullying or a formal complaint of harassment, verbal or written complaint to any school staff member requires them to do an investigation within 5 days. You could also fill out a complaint form online or email Respect for All at schools, which deals with harassment and bullying between school staff and or students. So this is an important distinction to make. We know some families will make a complaint to OPT about bullying that's happening on the bus. OPT will not deal with that. That has to be done at the school level. So make sure you're complaining to the right people.
And something to keep in mind, since there can be students from multiple schools on the same bus, it's still your child's school's responsibility to address the bullying. They are responsible for coordinating with the other schools, coordinating with the bus, figuring out where the other students go to school and addressing that issue. It's the responsibility of the student who is experiencing the bullying. It's the responsibility of their school to address that bullying, even if it involves students from other schools. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about Support Hub. This is the DOE's website where they take exceptions requests for busing, where they take complaints, really where you will find everything related to DOE forms for transportation. So if you go to this link, it will look like this. Welcome to the Support Hub. The screenshot is in Spanish. Sorry about that. But visually, it looks the same. This is Welcome to Support Hub. I am a student or family, a professional, or a vendor. And then you would click I am a student or family. I don't know what's going on with our slides here. Okay. So this is the next stage of the Support Hub screen. You'll see Support Hub is used for things beyond just transportation. You might also use it to request tech support, all sorts of things. But if you're dealing with transportation, you click transportation. Circled here. Sorry, the learning what animations are here. The next stage would be OPT. And then you see a whole long list of different options. If you are specifically here to make a complaint, you would pick the ticket that right now we see it in the top right corner. The order of this list changes based on what you have most recently clicked. So you have to read through these tickets to see what's the most relevant. But if you're trying to make a complaint about the bus, you're looking for the button that says, I'm having problems with my child's current school bus. And then you'll see a screen that pops up like this. This is generally how it will look for all of the different types of tickets. It's a description of why you're submitting a request. And then if that's relevant to you, if that's what you're looking for, just click Create Ticket. And then you'll get a formal pop-up where you can give more detail about what your complaint actually is. This is a very similar interface for if you're submitting an exceptions request, if you're submitting a complaint that the bus was late, whatever it is. Okay, we've been talking about contact information throughout. So this is the DOE contact information that is going to be most relevant. If you are looking for the student temporary housing regional managers, that's determined by the district where you reside, not the district where your child goes to school. So let's say you live in District 2, but your child goes to school in District 15. You are looking for the regional manager who handles District 2. Committee on Special Education is determined by the district of your school. So this is relevant for charter schools and non-public schools, again, based on where your child goes to school, not based on where you live. Superintendent offices, these are by school district, where your child goes to school. Transportation liaison, school district, where your child goes to school. And then school contacts, if you're looking for, let's say, the principal, or more specific school contacts like parent coordinator, you can find those by searching on schoolsearch.schools.nyc. One thing I will warn you is that schools don't publicly list who their school transportation coordinator is, but a great person to ask who the school transportation coordinator is the principal or the parent coordinator. Their contact information is listed for all schools. You can also ask in the front office who handles busing or transportation.
I'll just
Okay.
add too, sorry, 1 second, Anna.
Yep.
For families, a couple of you have asked about District 75. So the district transportation liaison for District 75 is technically the district where the school is located. There isn't a specific District 75 liaison, but there are a lot of unique challenges related to District 75 transportation. And so it can get complicated, like who to talk to and who to resolve it. If it's just like a routing issue, like you don't have a route, the district liaison for where the school is located is probably who you should go to. But if it has something to do with the IEP, like you have no bus pair or anything like that, that is actually a special education issue where should be reaching out to the family support coordinator at District 75, the superintendent of District 75, and the DOE special education office, which is special education at schools.nyc.gov. Those are the ones those are really the distinguishing factor for us there. And even you could even include the family support coordinator of District 75 in any communications that you have with the district transportation district liaison for where you reside too.
Okay, so some other resources that may be helpful. One, for all of this, we talked about, standard troubleshooting, steps 1 through 4. If this doesn't work, try this. If this doesn't work, try this. The last step after all of these is to call AFC, call our helpline. People like me and Janelle can help walk you through and can escalate as necessary. So if you are reading this and thinking like, I've done all of these things, I think that means you should probably give us a call at helpline. Some AFC resources. We've got our Resolving Transportation Issues tip sheet, our Arranging Transportation Guide. Those are the first 2 links. We've got the DOE's transportation website where they detail who's eligible and for what type of transportation, busing, Omni, all of that. We've also got AFC's Start of School Q&A for families of students with disabilities. Goes into more than just transportation issues, but transportation is a big start of school year issue oftentimes. And then we've got a tip sheet on students in temporary housing and how to support students in domestic violence shelters. These will go into more of the nitty gritty about students in temporary housing busing. If you need to make a complaint, we want to call the OPT customer service line, and the DOE support hub is available for those online complaints. Okay, language access rights, just something to keep in mind broadly, not just about transportation. Parents whose primary language is not English have a right to translation and interpretation. They should never be told to bring their own interpreter, or their student should never be asked to translate for the family. And the DOE has to automatically provide translated documents in a number of languages. So things that are being communicated out to the whole school community should be automatically translated into the most common languages in the district, which are listed here. If you need translation or interpretation, you should request it from your school or through the DOE form, which we've linked, or by calling 311. Please do remember to request it in advance if you have a meeting. And then if you need to make a complaint about low quality interpretation or the school not providing translation or interpretation, you can do that at the complaint line listed here or by sending an email to hello@schools.nyc.gov. And then last thing really quickly before we wrap up is if you are frustrated by your own students' experience with busing, or you're hearing us list out all of these troubleshooting options and thinking like, okay, but the options just aren't great, such as rideshare. We agree, and we would love for you to come join us at the rally that we are hosting on Monday, September 22nd from 12 to 1 p.m. in front of City Hall. We will be rallying with the Road to Better Busing Coalition, made up of parents, students, advocates, as we call on New York City leaders to fix our broken yellow bus system. We are advocating quite a bit right now and always for the myriad issues that affect busing. Busing doesn't pick students up on time. It doesn't provide consistent routes. It doesn't bring kids to school in a reasonable amount of time. It also cuts off students' access to after-school programs, summer programs, and weekend programs if they don't have access to busing. And we don't have a modernized system that puts students and families first, and we need one. So we're rallying for all those things. There is a QR code on the screen if you'd like to join us at that rally. And again, it's on Monday, September 22nd, so this coming Monday, in front of City Hall at 12 p.m. Okay, so we are wrapping up. I'm going to launch a quick poll. We'd love to get your feedback about this webinar. So if you could please fill out these questions. You're also welcome to take our survey that we've linked on the screen. And I am going to try to copy that into the chat. You can scan the QR code, or you can just fill out the Zoom poll that's projected up on your screen. You can also, if you have questions after all of this, we will stick around for a few minutes, but also always feel free to call our helpline or email us at info@advocatesforchildren.org. I'm gonna hop into the Q&A to make sure we've got everything.
So I just want to point out, someone mentioned something about, students in temporary housing or with disabilities that can't stay for after school programming because or activities because of their busing. And so if they want to stay in after school activities, but they have a bus and they could do a bus in the morning, and you should ask the school to give you like a Metro card for after, but the issue is you will need to come to school to do the Metro card and the transportation back with your child. But there is all sorts of issues, like you can't receive a Metro card while you're getting busing, and it is really unfair. One of the things that the rally is really important is, there are a lot of things that are not included in the bus contracts currently. The contracts are very old, And part of the renegotiating is hopefully to be able to try to renegotiate so that you can include things like after school busing, after school activities, right? So that students with disabilities or students in temporary housing who require busing may be able to get transportation. But that's not possible right now without being able to renegotiate the contracts. And so please come to the rally and lend your voice and your position to help us do that. And so the rally's on the 22nd, and you're going to be more information shared there about like what parents can do to support this from us. So yes, but please take this survey, and if you have any questions that we haven't answered, please put it in the chat. Anna and I are going to stick on for a little bit longer to answer any specific questions you may have. But if we haven't answered any, or you have like a really sticky issue that we didn't resolve today, like you already called your transportation liaison and they were not helpful, or they didn't answer you, you could also call our helpline if you don't have time now. And anyone on the helpline can support with that as well. We'll take it from there. I also put in the Q&A the contact information for the Director of Transportation Liaisons, Prince. They can help also if your transportation liaison is not responding to you.
One question that came in with registration that I just want to make sure that we answer is who actually determines the student's exact bus schedule. So something to keep in mind is that OPT creates routes and says, okay, Anna and Janelle should be on route 1, 2, 3, 4. They live close together and they go to schools that are close together. They then ask the bus company, ask that list of 50 bus companies to pick up that route and drive me and Janelle to school. The bus company then figures out, okay, what time are we going to get to Anna's house if we leave the depot at this time? What time are we going to get to Janelle's house? What time are we going to then get to each of their schools? So OPT creates the route. The bus company figures out the exact drop off and pickup times. And it's not an exact science. They actually have to drive the route a few times to figure out when they're actually going to get to my house, when they're actually going to get to Janelle's house. It's an estimate until that point. Students are going to be routed geographically, unless there's some sort of medical accommodation in place that says, okay, they should be the first student picked up because of, or the last student picked up, the first student dropped off because they have limited P. But that's only going to be there if there's a medical accommodation in place. Just scanning through to see if there are any other questions that came up in registration. Another one was, why does busing stop for kids in 3rd grade at my child's school? This could be about the fact that for students who are eligible for busing based on distance, the required distance increases after 3rd grade. So it may be that you live in a distance that is eligible, that students under 3rd grade are eligible for busing, but students above 3rd grade have to live further away from school to be eligible for busing. But the other eligibility paths are still available. Charter schools and McKinney-Vento still applies for charter schools. And we also had some questions about if you are trying to add busing or add in an accommodation to your student's IEP, but the IEP is closed, you can always ask for a new IEP meeting. You can have an IEP meeting whenever you want if there's new information to consider. So just ask for a new IEP meeting. And if you're having trouble adding, if you're waiting for the school to hold an IEP meeting, maybe you've submitted medical forms and you're waiting for that meeting to add an accommodation, follow up with the school's school-based support team or the school psychologist to ask to have that IEP meeting scheduled. Thank you all for joining us. Yep, if you've done the survey and you don't have any other questions, we're just hanging out to answer any questions that come in. So feel free to log off if you've completed the survey and you don't have any other questions. All right, looks like we are all set on questions. So thank you all for joining us. Please do give AFC a call if you run into any transportation issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.